I can smell it in London. Should I start?
Whenever you're ready, Senator.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Well, like most of you, I did have an opportunity to listen to the Senate President's press conference this morning. I want to make it clear that I like and respect the Senate President, but what I heard is a lot of noise and distraction from what is really going on here. The Democrats only want another tax increase. They have turned their back on reforms and compromise.
Oh, and that's it? You're ready for
And
questions?
that's it. I'm ready for questions.
It sounds like it's a game of, well, I'm good, but the other guy, they're not compromised. So what are we to believe?
Again, a lot of noise and distraction from what's really going on here. All the Democrats want is another tax increase. All of the rest of the chatter about bills filed or not filed or process, again, distraction. Look at what's going on in Illinois. You know, we have significant, severe problems. Despite the fact we're a great state and we deserve so much better, we are ranking near the bottom in absolutely everything. The city of Chicago is struggling mightily. I mean, some would say actually near bankruptcy. And yet, the only thing the Democrats want to talk about is another tax increase. They try to say they want to protect middle-class families. What middle-class families is want relief from the enormous property taxes that we have in this state that are just crushing them and forcing them to leave.
President Tillerson seemed very concerned today about this future campaign ads, and he says, you know, how are we supposed to work with you if you're also telling us in the next breath that you're going to run all these ads against us?
Well, quite honestly, the only ads I'm aware of occurred last week from the Democrat Party of Illinois into Republican districts.
So do you know of some sort of pending campaign here from the governor?
I would suggest you talk with the governor's office about that. I'm not going to be running ads next
After
week.
we've been on this,
mentioned that at the meeting on Friday, you were there.
He has never mentioned specifically ads, and as I said, I'm responsible for the Senate caucus. We won't be running ads. I would ask the Democrats, though, if they're so proud of what's going on in this state, why aren't they running ads?
So Cullerton said the ads are coming, according to Rauner. You're saying nothing was said about that. I mean, it sounds like somebody doesn't have their story straight, or somebody's spinning us, or what have you.
Well, I think there's been general discussion, and the governor's been clear publicly about the fact that he is ready to take this thing to the people directly. I think we all assume that will be in the form of ads, but to my knowledge, I've not seen any ads. Again, I think those questions are more appropriate for the governor's office.
will that help things though? I mean, could you see that moving the agenda? Will that buttress Republicans' argument? Or as somebody who's been here, the governor's new, will that be something, Senate President Cullerton said, hey, we've worked together before, that's how we got the pension bill, fine, it was voted down, that's how we got it. Will that make things so just toxic that you're not going to be able to reach a compromise?
Well, it seems to me that we have two choices right now. We're at the end of session. We haven't been able to reach an agreement because the Democrats have walked away from the table with respect to compromise on any reforms whatsoever. So their demand is, we want a tax increase. The Senate President said, that's what's happened before, that's how we need to solve this. That's not going to happen without reform. The governor's been crystal clear he is willing to entertain revenue discussions, but it will not happen without real reform.
Are both sides just being stubborn right now? Seems like no one's willing to flinch, but everyone has complaints about each other.
I don't think that both sides are being equally stubborn. I think the governor has made it clear that he's willing to compromise. The reform bills that he introduced contained compromises and suggestions from the Democrats. They were summarily voted down on partisan roll calls, and we come back on the last day of session to hear, hey, Republican governor ought to just raise taxes. That is not going to happen.
Do you see a realistic bipartisan path forward? And if so, what is it?
I do think there's a realistic bipartisan path forward because, again, I think that the governor and our caucus and the House Republicans as well have indicated we are willing to compromise, but reform has to be real. It has to be what the taxpayers, the citizens of the state, are talking about. And they're talking about being crushed under property taxes. They're talking about jobs leaving this state, and quite frankly, middle-class families are following those jobs out of this state. So I think typically the Democrats have been used to having their way 100%. They have been in charge, as we all know, for the last 13 years. It's a different dynamic now. And I think what we're seeing is they're trying to behave in the same old way.
Is there a siren song of campaign cash that is luring Republicans to stick with the governor?
I wouldn't say that. I would not say that. And in fact, the governor was somewhat helpful in the last campaign cycle, but by no means were our campaigns different than they typically are.
Is all of this fuss over the ads that it sounds like be forthcoming from the governor, is all of this kind of, I don't know, ironic or something, given how Democrats have run campaigns in the past with their abundance of money relative to yours?
Well, that's a very good point. Typically, the Democrats have had far more campaign cash, and I think, as you know, that's one of the core issues the governor's talked about, is that there's somewhat of a corrupt bargain between the funders on the Democrat side and the policies that have taken place in this state. Governor Rauner does have access to large amounts of money. That is another different dynamic that we haven't seen before.
Having heard the president speak this morning, you see any point in hanging around here for the rest of the afternoon?
Well, we still do have a few bills to pass, but I don't think there's much point hanging around much beyond this afternoon.
So then what's next? What's next after today?
I think we all go home, take a break, regroup, and start to talk again about the compromise that's needed. When we left the leaders' meeting yesterday, or whenever it was, when we left the leaders' meeting the Senate president, as you recall, came out of that meeting and said, yes, he's willing to compromise. I take him at his word. He's compromised before on big issues.
The person who seems unwilling to compromise would be Speaker Madigan, who's called lots of these things extremes, the word that he used. And he's not said, sure, we can cut a deal.
Well, that's the Speaker. I mean, I have not worked as closely with the Speaker as I have with the Senate President. He's been more willing to compromise on issues.
Did the governor start off very extreme in his positions, though? I mean, when you strategized in the beginning, was that always the play, hey, let's start really far on one end because then we can come to the middle? Was that always the thought?
I think during the development of the session, some of the items on the turnaround agenda, we all found had less support than perhaps we thought in the first place. The governor has been very realistic, though, in the last several weeks on prioritizing and focusing on what he thinks are legitimate, doable reforms and things that really get at the heart of what the people in this state want.
Leader, without using the phrase crystal clear, I think the last few months have been anything but, and I'm beginning to get the idea that the governor is someone who, at least I as a reporter, have kind of a hard time getting a straight answer out of. The answers don't always answer questions. An example being, well, what about Beth Purvis being paid out of some other budget? He gave a 2-minute answer that had nothing to do with the question.
Well, I wasn't there, so
I
I can't really speak to that.
But can you specifically refute the idea that the governor is someone who refers to talking points as opposed to answering a direct question? Do lawmakers get the idea that he's that kind of guy to deal with?
I'm sorry, I'm distracted by the ringing phone. Could you?
Would you like to answer?
Go ahead. Saved by the bell.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
I'm bothered. I'm bothered. I'm bothered by this. I'm bothered that the governor. I'm bothered that the governor switches to talking points when really we want an answer to questions.
Oh goodness! You have to have talking points that outlines your ideas, your theories. I think everyone who is in a policy-making position uses talking points. What we need to do is move beyond those talking points, both on the Democrat side and the Republican side, to come together and get some details of the agreement. But you have to start with talking points. Those are the concepts.
Have the leaders' meetings been all talking points? That's what Democratic leaders say. They say it's the same stuff we hear in press conferences is what they've had in their meetings behind closed doors with the governor, that it hasn't been actual negotiations ever.
Well, the fact of the matter is the governor tried to set up working groups to negotiate. What the Democrat leaders didn't do is send people that were authorized to negotiate. So I think when we move forward from here, I would hope that rather than have that intermediary level of people who aren't authorized to negotiate, that the Democrat leaders themselves come to the table and talk about what they are willing to negotiate on.
Does the governor actually have a mandate? Senate President Cullerton said this was not an overwhelming mandate. These issues that are part of the turnaround agenda weren't discussed in the campaign. That wasn't the bulk of the campaign. The bulk of the campaign was class warfare, back and forth. It wasn't the merits of workers' compensation. It wasn't right-to-work zones. It wasn't any of that.
Well, those are details. But again, to the concept of talking points in the campaign is the people of this state rejected the direction the state was going. By overwhelming majorities, people think Illinois has been headed in the wrong direction. They rejected one-party control, and the governor came in saying very clearly he was going to be transformative, he was going to change things. And that's what he is continuing to attempt to do.
Thank you.
We could do that.
Just ring the phone again. That really threw me off.
I don't know how you did that on your meeting. I don't know either. That's slightly very painful.
I know.
It's new cards.
Yeah,
It's very nice, but it's
We're all worried
painful.
about sound
Yeah.
quality.
Save it forever, there are other things to do.
No, I know.